Hello. Welcome to another Thursday with Dr. Rosie Kuhn and Spiritual Dilemmas. I'm a little nervous today because there is a lot to talk about and I'm not sure how it's all going to come out. Last month we talked about relationships, last month being June of 2021. We talked about relationships and spirituality and the dilemmas that show up. This month, being July 2021, we're talking about health and well-being and the role that spirituality plays with health and well-being. So stay tuned. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yes, say hello. Hi, Aisha. I'm glad you're here. And anybody else that's here, I would love for you to say hello and that I know that you're here. So as I was mentioning, we're talking about spirituality and health and well-being. And is there such a thing as being spiritually healthy and spiritual health and well-being? And so we're going to be talking about all of that today. Now, my thing is I've just got so much information inside of me that I want to get out in an hour, and I don't know how it's going to come out. So what would be really helpful, hopefully, is that you guys who are here in the live chat can ask questions that maybe sparks a focused, intentional conversation, which would be great. So that's my request. So over here, I have my notes. So if I look over here, I'm just looking at my notes. So first of all, for me, a lot of people, a number of months ago, I did one of these lives and I called it the hobby of spirit keeping. I keep fish, I have aquariums inside, and I have a few outdoor ponds that have fish in them. And so the hobby of fish keeping is there's a level of attention and concern and commitment and dedication to whatever hobby you are in. I have this hobby. But there's also, I think of spirituality as a hobby for a lot of people. We dabble in it. We do it sometimes. But if you're as committed in terms of having a dog or a cat or having fish or animals or something that needs caring on a long-term basis, then you have to be far more committed to that hobby. And spirituality can be that hobby. And I say that way because it's so easy for people who have experiences to forget that I'm talking about or that you're listening for. What are the simple elements of this process of well-being and health and spirituality, as opposed to here's the lofty ideas, here's the loftiness of what you should be or where you should be. And really, if I take it back to the basics, then I'm more likely to either answer some of your questions without you asking, or perhaps saying things that would engage you in a conversation with yourself or me, if you happen to be here, and through comments below, if you'd like. So for me, spirituality in essence is cultivating a relationship with ourselves. And it starts out, most of us start out not having an idea. And I'm talking about being children. We don't have an idea of who we are. We are this little automatic Roboton kind of beings that are doing what we're supposed to do. We watch TV, we watch our Facebook and YouTube, and we do what we're supposed to do without a sense of self. And at some point we go, wait, what do I like? What do I want? What do I need? Not based on here's what the latest fashion statement is, or what the latest diets are, or the latest relationship news. It's like, what is it that I want? And quite often I'll use the analogy of people in the LGBT community because they have a sense of who they are and have more so now than ever, but were not allowed to know that they were who they were and how they were expressing themselves and how they needed to express themselves. What was a natural unfolding of who they were. And so coming out for them is a big deal. And quite often for us, coming out as spiritual beings or recognizing ourselves as spiritual beings is a big deal. A lot of people don't want to talk about their spiritual practices because they're afraid of ridicule and rejection and all the rest of it. Hi, Marge. Back for more of your unique perspective on what it means to be spiritually healthy. Thank you. Glad you're here. So for us to begin to look at ourselves and say, who am I, is the beginning of cultivating that relationship with me, you with you. And as a coach, my job is to ask questions so that you can, as a thinking partner. So here, even in these events, in these lives, I'm here to ask questions that will support and empower you to think for yourself and say, well, what is true for me? And how do I see that? And how is that important for me to honor myself? So the more that we can begin to recognize and acknowledge that we have value and we have have perspectives that are important to us, we have a knowing that is even more so than our opinions. We have a knowing. And the more that we recognize and respect that, the greater degree of alignment we feel with ourselves. And so we take it from, in a sense, a stage of having no sense of self to beginning to cultivate a sense of self. And that's usually when we're in our pre-adolescence and adolescence, and even in our early adulthoods, we're learning who we are and what's true for us. And the longer that we're on the planet, we have greater and greater opportunities. Sorry for Gracie to bark. That's okay, Grace. We have greater opportunities to know ourselves and then to align ourselves with our highest truth, our highest knowing. So having a healthy sense of spirituality, in a sense, is the ability and the willingness to have a healthy relationship with ourselves. Now, there's a point, in this graduation, and I'm kind of, again, talking from this hobby element of the elements of this, but where there's a point where you go, wow, I feel a sense of divinity. I feel a sense of connection to something greater than myself. So the more that we get to know ourselves, quite often it takes us from that egoic sense of here's what I like, here's what I want to look like, here's what I want to marry, here's what I want in terms of what looks good and what's important to other people. And it becomes what's more important to me on the inside and not so much on the outside. But as we grow, we cultivate, we have experiences that sometimes align with ourselves in a way that we never have before. When I think about, hello, David, I'm glad you're here. One of the things that's so important to me, has become so important for me, is to acknowledge the degree to which being an aspect of the divine that I am and that you are and that everything in the universes are, we're all an aspect of the divine, that's a really important component of my spiritual relationship, my unfolding with myself, my getting to know who I am. And I want to go, that's so important for you to get. But the truth is you may not get it any sooner than I got it. Because I was 69 now, but to get that, I was like 68, really, truly. And so where you get that point where you are knowing yourself as an aspect of the divine and that we are all aspects of the divine is all on your timing and not mine and not anybody's to say who, here's what the truth is. And if you don't get this and if you don't know this, that's bad. It's like there's no right, wrong, good or bad in this. There's only your practice. And what we're looking at is the practices that cultivate a sense of well-being for you and cultivates a sense of health in you. So that's where we're at. So welcome to you guys. Thanks for being here. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm really looking forward to them because, as I was saying, it's like I've got so much going on in this particular conversation. I'm not sure where to start, but I will start again in terms of where I'm going next. So I've talked about the importance of knowing ourselves as a spiritual practice, and the more before I go here, the more that we can focus on that, the greater the degree of health and well-being. So now I'll go back to this. This is one of my very, 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 very favorite books on the planet in terms of the integration of medical science, intuitive, spiritual, all of it, nutritional. She really says so much in this book, Radical Remissions. The 9 key factors that can make a real difference. Now, what she did is her name is Kelly Turner. Kelly was a counselor working with oncology patients, people who had cancer. And she came across people who have actually had remissions. And she'd say, have you talked to anybody about that? And they go, yeah, I talked to my doctor, but he didn't say anything about it. And over time, she realized that radical remissions were happening a lot, not just in her neighborhood, but all over the world. And so she did her dissertation research, her PhD research on radical remissions, and found that there were 75 things that different people did that brought them to a radical remission. But there were 9 things that everybody did. 9 things that everybody did that brought about radical remissions. And that's pretty remarkable, I think. And I've read this book and I recommend it to everyone. And here's the 9. I'll just read them, but we'll be focusing on one in particular, obviously. So radically changing your diet, take out those carbs and those, maybe take out meat and dairy and all that stuff. It's really challenging to most of us. So change your diet, take control of your health. And that means kind of what we're talking about today. Take control of your health in terms of noticing what you're doing that isn't contributing to health and well-being. Follow your intuition. That's a really big part of conversations that are part of this as well. Use herbs and supplements. Release suppressed emotions. Increase positive emotions. And those two are connected to when we're thinking about releasing suppressed emotions. We have to start to have a relationship with ourselves. We have to start to know what's inside. We have to start to get a sense of, oh, I have some repressed stuff. I have some things I don't want to talk about. I have some things I don't want to feel. But those repressed energies, those emotions that have been repressed, really are so much of the source of so much of our disease and illness. And so that's a part of what we're talking about is we have to know ourselves to begin to get a sense of, oh, yeah, I haven't dealt with that and I don't want to deal with that. It's too scary. But if I don't deal about it, my cancer I'm not going to be able to maybe heal my cancer. Embracing social support. It's another thing. It's a lot of us, especially when we're sick or depressed or unhappy, is we disengage. Where what she's saying is it's one of the 9 things that are really important, which is embracing social support. Get support. Include your families and connections into whatever it is that is happening. It might not be the natural family in terms of how your relations are with your biological family, but the people that care about you. Number 8, deepening your spiritual connection. And that's kind of what we're talking about today is deepening your spiritual connection. Deepening your spiritual connection is one of the 9 variables, the 9 things that everybody did who had a radical remission. What? Yeah, deepen your spiritual connection. That's what everyone did. And they all had radical remissions. And then number 9 is having strong reasons for living. So that's a really important piece too, is when people are thinking about or considering what they're going to do about their cancer, do you have a strong reason for living? That's a huge part of our relationship with ourselves. David Hawkins, I think it was, said something like, cancers and heart disease And all of those things that people die from, they're a slow, intentional suicide that we're, in a sense, intentionally not taking care of our emotional self, our spiritual self, our physical, mental, all of it. We're not taking care of ourselves intentionally. And so there's that part of us that wants to die. And if we don't handle that, well, number one, we will die. We'll get sick and have diseases that we don't want to have. We'll spend lots of money in hospitals that we don't want to. And so if we get clear about who we are, what we want, what's making life unhappy for us and unjoyful. Now, it doesn't mean that if we're joyful that you won't get cancer, but you're less likely, I think, from what the statistics are saying. So those are parts of things. But what I'm looking at is this number. It doesn't matter what the number is in it, but that deepening your spiritual connection is so important to your health and well-being. Isn't that? I think I want to say it's crazy, but it's only crazy because our consensus reality says to heal from your cancer, go to a medical doctor, Western medicine, get chemo, get radiation, get surgery. That's all there is. And now there's so many books and so much more research that says, nope, there's so much more. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today. We're just skimming the surface today, really. Marge asks the question, what makes remission radical? I think that's an interesting question. That I think what makes it radical is that it's so unlikely. A lot of the people, there's really great research in this, really great personal stories from people who've had their remissions, but also from healers and therapists and doctors who were part of their process. So the radical is that a lot of these people had stage 4 cancers or stage 4s, whatever that is, and when that's like, you're most likely not. It seems like a death sentence to get a stage 4 radical or stage 4 diagnosis, and so when they go into remission, and not only go in remission, but the cancer disappears, it's pretty radical. And a radical experience, radical happening. So that's what makes it radical. Is it's not supposed to happen. So, but it just depends on what side of the fence you're in. If you're in the Western medicine perspective, it's highly radical because it just doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often. But when you're in the science and the perspective of what's possible through our consciousness of who we are, we have the capacity to heal ourselves. Our bodies have the capacity to heal ourselves. But when we get in the way with our mentalizations, when we get in our way of what other people tell us, we get in the way of what experts tell us, and we're not listening to ourselves, we're not listening to our intuitions, we're not listening to our higher sense of self and our higher knowing, we're not listening, then that's what gets us in trouble. When we don't trust our own knowing. Our consensus reality is constantly bombarding, and not only our consensus reality, but our husbands or our wives or our children or our parents are constantly bombarding with, there's something you got to, you're not doing it right. You're not doing enough. You should be doing it different. All of these shoulds. And it's like, the only message is you're not okay. You can't do this life thing. Okay. You can't trust yourself. And so we abdicate ourselves and our knowing. And we say to other people, hey, what do you need? What do you want? And I'll do that. How do you want me to be? I'll do that. And so we become very oppressed. And it might be initially by choice. It's like, I want to make that person happy. But at some point we get oppressed and we lose ourselves. And at some point, something's going to trigger us to say, okay, I need to stop doing that because I'm not happy. And this is usually when people will begin to turn to a spiritual practice or begin to turn to becoming more self-conscious, maybe self-help books, so that they can begin to question what's really going on inside me, and having the courage to do that. Marge says, what you're saying reminds me of Joe Dispenza's book, I Am the Placebo. Absolutely. There's no question. And also I use a particular product, a supplement called ASEA, ASEA. And the science behind that is the science behind so much of what science is finding, which is we have this huge capacity to bring healing and wholeness to ourselves, but we have to look at it differently. We have to look at who we are differently. We have to look at the choices that we make. We have to become responsible for the fact that we feel yucky and grumpy and pissed off, and we think that's normal. But when we go, okay, wait, I have a choice here. I can be a choice about how I feel and what's true. I can shift that. Then we become empowered, and we begin to know more about who we are and our capacity to heal ourselves and to be whole and healthy, and be in a state of well-being and whole being. I listened to Paul Selig. His books are just extraordinary, basically saying, when we know ourselves to be an aspect of the divine, or when we know ourselves to be an aspect of consciousness, when we know ourselves to be an aspect of the universal unfolding of all that is, and David Hawkins says this too, we are 100% potentiality. We are 100% potential to create the reality that we want to exist. We have that capacity. Now, again, this is sort of going from the hobby of spirit keeping. This is one of those places like, wow, that's kind of can't get there yet. And that's what took me a long time. But I would listen to what David Hawkins would say, and I'm listening to what the guides are saying with Paul Selig, and I would listen to and really pay attention to the Course in Miracles, and another book that I use, which is Oneness. Now, all of these are channeled works, not David's, but all of these are channeled works. The Oneness book, Paul Selig's work, Course in Miracles, and they're all saying the same thing, that we have this capacity for miracles. I mean, I laugh, but it's like, it's so extraordinary to know that, and to begin to practice and train myself in such a way that more miracles are showing up, more synchronicity showing up, more manifestations are showing up, more love is showing up, more generosity of spirit is showing up, more good stuff is showing up. And that's just the progression. And it's so fun to get to that point of progression where you're actually engaging in a relationship with spirit as in the divineness of all that is, and engage in such a way that becomes playful and a communication. So again, starting with, I think I'll keep a couple of fish in my little fish pond kind of level of hobby, to progressing to a place of many fish and many whatever, and learning and I'm again keep using the analogy of that, but the progression takes you to greater and greater abilities and capacities, and it's the same with this process of committing ourselves to health and well-being on all levels. The radical remission is saying, okay, here's what you got to do physically, here's what you got to do emotionally, here's what you got to do spiritually, here's what you got to do on these different ways, because those are all parts of ourselves. One of the things I do want to mention again, and I said I'm all over the place today with this, is that this part of us, this physical thing, is basically about 1% of who we are as a being, an energetic, vibrational being. This physical piece is just 1% of that potentially. So we've got this physical, and then we've got what we call the metaphysical, which is all that stuff out here that we don't understand. And some people just call that spiritual. And it's a, we called it transpersonal. And it says it's beyond the personal, the physical, the personal, what we think of as ourselves. And we're beyond that, but it includes so much more. And a lot of people can include that without seeing it as a spiritual or divinity, sacred reverence kind of perspective. It's just that it's there. So we live in this metaphysical world, and we manifest into form what we have around us. So many people can call that, again, I'm just saying that's very part of the spiritual world. And some people don't call it that. Some people don't think of it as divine and or sacred. But I'm just mentioning that because so many of us use metaphysical tools like dowsing. I dowse with a pendulum or with my fingers, or tarot cards, or astrology, or crystals, or Reiki. All of these things are energy based, or any kind of energy medicine. It's metaphysical, it's out here, and it's not necessarily what people think of as sacred. I'm just saying that because so many people use these tools in these ways for health and well-being, which is really important. And they may not distinguish it as being spiritual, and that's okay. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying that's just what is. So just distinguishing that. What I've written down in terms of what I think of as spiritual health is like, how do you know you have spiritual health? And I started out by looking at, how do you know you're not in spiritual health? So how do you guys know when you are not in spiritual health and well-being? How do you know? Anybody have an answer how they know? For me, how I know is, number one, I am not in peace. So when I am my spiritual well-being and my spiritual health, if I'm not in a state of peace, and not peace as in nirvana, but the majority of me is in a state of peace, if not all of me. So being in a state of peace is an indicator of spiritual health and well-being. Another is when I am experiencing a sense of being oppressed or persecuted or victimized, that the memories perhaps of my past, or the ways that I am being in my life that is not positive. And I can feel that it's and positive. Not, what I mean by that is, I'm not in a state of my fullest expression, my authentic self. I'm afraid to be me. I'm afraid to let people see me. It's one of the practices for me doing these lives is, this is me. I'm not sitting, I've got my notes here, but oh my God, it's like, this is what comes through me when I'm speaking to you. And it's a practice for me to appreciate and just be with that. Marge says, what you are saying reminds me, or fearful. So Marge just said, or fearful. I didn't, if there was something else before or fearful, Marge, let me know. Yeah, I'm not in peace, or I think what you're saying is when you are fearful. And yeah, that's a really big, a big indicator I'm not in spiritual well-being. Now, again, there's this progression of where you can be in your life and on your spiritual path. And so that you can't even imagine being without fear is like normal, because that's what our consensus reality keeps telling us that, hey, you got to be afraid, be very afraid, because things are going to be bad or badder or whatever. We've got heat waves right now with the weather, and it's like, oh my God, this is terrible and horrible, and what's going to happen, and all of that franticness. We just came out of the COVID thing, and we just came out of fires last fall in the United States. Like, there's constantly this fear-basedness. And in the spiritual principles that make sense to me and work for me is like, when you are in your highest divine knowing, in that place of that, there is no fear. Course in Miracles says this all the time. And so that place of no fear is a good place to be. Huge practice. I haven't mastered that one, but I'm getting closer to mastering that, in a sense of going, okay, I'm feeling fear. So I'm not in my spiritual well-being. And what do I need to do? What do I need to shift to bring that over? And I talk about the paradigm shift. It's like, I know that when I'm in this place of spiritual alignment and balance, that I'm not in that state of fear. And it's not because I'm denying that there's something to be afraid of. It's that my reality exists in that reality, that there is nothing to be afraid of. And I truly believe that. And it's a fascinating process, and I'm excited, and I want to say, come on along, come do, stay on your path, because as hard as it can be, and how scary it can be, it's also an amazing adventure, truly. Marge says, like when I'm trying to force my life, make others like me by being what they want me to be. Yes, if I am and Aisha says, if I am judgmental. Yeah. When I'm judgmental, Aisha, when you're judgmental, there's a state of righteousness, a state of control, a state of this is how it should be, and this is how they should be. And there's no room for their sacredness. There's no room for their sense of truth, their sense of owning for themselves what they want in their life. And so, yeah, my judgmentalness is a really good indicator I'm not in my spiritual well-being. And like Marge is saying, when I'm trying to force my life, when I'm making others like me by being what they want me to be, it's like, yes, we're out of alignment with who we are. We're out of alignment of our true nature, our true gift. In the sense, each of us, I some of this stuff like 20, 30 years ago, I would just like roll my eyes like, oh my God. When I was training to be a coach, and one of the lines that my trainer would use, Hans Phillips would say, is, you're a gift. You're a gift. And it's like, yucky stuff. But over time, we begin to realize that our authenticness, this is the expression of this being. And this being is this. And when I tried and I worked really hard to be what other people wanted me to be, it didn't make me happy. It didn't make them happy. Because I was miserable, they were miserable. So the more that I am this, then the people that hang around with me, we have a really good time. We laugh a lot, and play, and all of those kinds of things, because I'm not trying to force anything anymore. Even in terms of relating with you in these YouTube videos, it's like there's a part of me that wants to force this into an alignment of like a overview and the outline, and it's going to come out clear. That's not who I am. So every time I come to one of these lives, it's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what's going to come out. And then all of a sudden an hour goes by and we're done. And there was value for those who got value. And if it wasn't valuable, people go away. So it's just what I do. It's just how I be me and how I share myself in the world. So the way that I am, I'm saying you're the gift as well. You, in your genuine, authentic presence, is such a gift. And we kind of all put bushel baskets on our head saying, oh, I don't want them to see me. But that's what we're here to do, is to be seen. And when we can be seen, we can share that love, and it just expands and heals the world. David says, might withdrawal be a subtle state of fear? That's a great question. Because it's, quite often we think, here's the right thing to do, here's the wrong thing to do. And it's the question that I ask as a coach is, What's the intention behind the behavior? What's the intention behind the action? So you say, might withdrawal be a subtle state of fear? It's like, absolutely. It could be. It could also be a state of reverence and a need for solitude. So it can be, withdrawal can happen and be necessary because it's there's a desire or a knowing inside myself that says I have to withdraw. And so we're watching that. It's like, oh, am I doing that out of fear, or am I doing that because it's in alignment with my desire or my need right now? And so if I'm withdrawing out of fear, now I can ask myself a question. This again brings us back to what's true for me? What do I know? What am I afraid of? What's scary? What's scaring that part of me inside? What aspect of me wants to withdraw and go away? So thanks for bringing that up. That's really helpful. Another indication of not being in spiritual health is the degree to which we lie to ourselves. And I spoke about this a number of months ago. We talked about I think the title of the YouTube video was Lie, Cheat, and Steal. And when we're lying to ourselves, we're out of alignment with ourselves. We don't want to know who we are. We don't want to be who we are. For whatever reason that is, a lot, again, going back to LGTB, those people, the people who are sexually different than what they should be. So many people go into hiding because they can't deal with what that would mean to their identity or to themselves. And so when we do this, it's not just people about our sexuality, but perhaps it's, the corporate person who wants to be an artist or a singer, wherever it is that we have that can't follow through with being who I am. It's just too scary. We often lie to ourselves. And there's so many, I've been working out lately and I listen to this music, which is crazy making, but it's all about you. And I said this last week, you complete me, and who are you? I can't be who I am without you. And all of those kinds of things where there's that sense of I need a husband, or I need a partner in order to be complete, or I need children to be complete, or I need a job in the corporate world to be complete. Whenever we're looking outside ourselves to be completed, there's a lie there that we can't yet face. That, no, that's not going to complete me. But right now it's the only thing I know. And it's part of the progress of being on our spiritual journey is right now. That's all that's true is I need this to complete me. And it's an external something or other, but we don't know any better. We just don't know until we know. Marge says, oh my gosh, I spent the majority of myself. Oh, I'm sorry, Marge. Oh my gosh, I spent the majority of my life lying to myself. Yes. And you are not alone. You are not alone. Most of us are lying to ourselves all the time because it's too scary to be who we really are. And who we are is divine and beautiful and wonderful, but we've been told over and over again, don't be that. Don't be that. Don't be that. And so we stop being ourselves, and we start lying and cheating ourselves. We cheat ourselves, and we cheat our partners, we cheat our children, we cheat people all the time. We cheat our health, we cheat our everything, because we're in that state of not wanting to face what we're so afraid of. And then we get clear about, oh, I maybe I have to face this, even though I'm scared to death to face it. And that's really the beginning. For me, I was in such agony in my life. And I was a therapist. I lived in Nova Scotia. It was a beautiful life, but I loved my job. I loved what I was doing, but I was so miserable in my personal life. I had to get straightened out. And I began looking at myself through the lens of relationship addiction and codependency, and being a adult child of alcoholics. So I started looking through myself through those lenses, and found so much compassion in the literature, so much compassion in people, so much compassion and support, that I was able to make that happen. And I think we can find that more and more, that compassion, and the compassion in literature and YouTube's, hopefully, and all sorts of support now for people when they need the support that's going to make this a little bit easier for them to address. Being able to have a relationship with ourselves that is honest and authentic, because we can't have an honest and authentic relationship with anybody else until we can do that with ourselves. Now, how many times have you heard that? Like 100 million times. You got to be in relationship with yourself first. You got to appreciate and respect yourself before you can do it with somebody else. We hear that all the time, but we don't take it seriously until we get to the point where you go, wow, since I've gotten more honest with myself, I can do that much more easily without hurting people's feelings, without, deprecating myself or other people. That's a good thing. So yeah, we lie to ourselves. We live in a lot of stress, anxiety, and fear. And that's a really good indicator that we're not in spiritual well-being, is the degree to which we live in stress and anxiousness. Marge says, the turning point for me was finding compassion for that awkward young woman that I was. Yeah. So many people will say to me in their 50s or 40s and 60s and 70s and go, oh my God, I'm doing this so late. I finally got to know who I'm at, and it's so late. It's like, no, it's so great, because now you can see who you had to be. You had to go through that so you can know yourself better now. And so we have more compassion, and that's a very good thing. And certainly there's regret. The regret, like, oh, I wish I could have done this sooner. I have regret. I wish I could have done it sooner. And at the same time, it's like, wow, I am so excited because of what I've learned, and because of that ability now to have compassion for the me as a young girl and a young wife, but also past life traumas and all of the beings that I was that got me to this point. All of those. That's why I'm saying this is 1% of all of what I am and all that you are. So when we can begin to have compassion and honor that, then it's easier for me to have those conversations with myself. In a sense, that's what I'm saying, is like, rather than hating myself and judging myself for being a horrible, terrible person, I go, okay, let's look at what you were, and let's honor who you were and what you had to go through to get here. And that really helped me as well, as to have more compassion for that person. David says, perhaps self-denial is a cover and hiding one's truth to pain. Therefore, hiding one's pain, we might lie to ourselves. Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't want to experience the pain. We don't want to take responsibility for the pain. We don't want to perhaps blame others for the pain, all of that. And so we go into denial. When I'm not sure, David, that this is what you're talking about. And maybe it's not relevant, but when I was 26 and I divorced my husband, and I realized that my children's well-being would be best served to be with their dad, because he had stability and security, and I needed to grow myself up. I needed to do things, and they were better off with their dad. I had no doubt about that, even though I loved them tremendously. And so in making that decision, I cut off myself. I didn't experience. I denied because I was like, I truly thought that this was the best thing for my children. And so I went with that. And whatever was true for me in terms of my loss as a mother and my loss as identity and all of that, I I was in denial for 10, 20 years until it started to come up in ways that was very painful and disjointed. But I realized then the degree to which I was ignoring my own loss and my own pain and my own, I lived to be a mother and then I gave it up. It's like, God, it was horrible. So that denial is pretty powerful, and it's very helpful for a lot of people when they just can't be with the craziness of the situations. They go into denial. So it can be, denial is not necessarily a bad thing. It just can be what one does, like you're saying, to live with the pain. So thanks for bringing that up. I was remembering when I was living in the Bay Area, I did some talks in San Francisco, and one of those talks was with people who had been unemployed from corporations. And many of those people had talked about it being the soullessness of the organizations. And they were, in a sense, traumatized by what they had been living with while they were working in those organizations, that there was a soullessness and what that did to them. And they were in a state of rehabilitating and recovering who they were because they had lost themselves to what they thought was the path, material wealth and prestige and working for this great company and all of those kinds of things. And when they got let off and let go, it just, again, this place of denial, it's like, they were devastated. And so those kinds of relationships and those kinds of working environments or living environments, many of us live in those kinds of environments where it's a soulless place. And when we realize that, then we can begin to create more well-being for ourselves. Thank you, Aisha, for feeling my pain. And yes, everything has a price. I still believe that I did the very best I did for my children. I believe that out of love, I think they had a better life, but they have a different story about that. But yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So another one would be lack of personal relationships, lack of human care and sympathy, understanding, and maybe the degree to which you are disconnected from yourself, and you may be more connected to social media and those kinds of things where you're disconnected from you. Thanks, Aisha, for believing me. So where we're disconnected and we don't have the capacity for understanding other people or ourselves. It's just pretty fascinating. So all of these places are, in a sense, indications of a lack of spiritual well-being. So that's a good place to start with that. And so for me, Aisha says, even I do everything for my kids. They think a maid can do that too. Yes. Yeah. I don't think, I think every parent gets that kind of perspective from their kids, because until they're kids, when they have kids, then something shifts potentially there. But yeah, I think you're right. So spiritual health means, in a sense, there's less fear or no fear, a fearlessness in your life. And it's authentic, and it's a place from that knowing that you are part of a larger self that is there's no reason to fear. And again, that's further along, I think, on this path in terms of spirituality. But it's something that I have experienced more and more, this place of no fear. It's pretty extraordinary. And and another piece for me of spiritual health means that when I go into those places that are fearful, or I get triggered, or I get ignited into something that doesn't feel comfortable, that I have resources beyond myself, and that I'm willing to, much like this, I'm willing to reach out to social resources and other resources so that I can support myself through this process and get support through these processes. So number one, no fear. But if there's fear and difficulties, that I reach beyond myself for support. Another one is that I align myself with my highest truth, my highest good, my highest knowing, and my highest contribution. When I'm in that state of alignment, it feels great. I'm happy. I'm this, basically. David says, I started my journey 8 years ago seeking answers to toxic family behavior. Understanding has helped, but not fixed the problem. Only a few tools to handle the interactions with dysfunction. Yeah, it's very challenging to realize the degree to which our families and ourselves are in that dysfunction. And then, like you said, being able to find some answers, find some understandings that has helped, but it doesn't fix the problem, especially things like alcoholism or physical violence and abuse, those kinds of things that are patterns that are beyond, that are fixable or tolerable. And those are really hard places that we have to find a way to individuate ourselves from, to accept what is, like the Serenity Prayer, accept the things I cannot change. You can't change that. You can't you can't be in relationship anymore, but you have to come to have the courage to find what you can change and do that. But it's hard. It's really, really hard. But the place of health, spiritual health and well-being is your capacity to know yourself and to say, this is not me. I am not aligned with that. I can't interact with that, engage with that. And I have to honor myself. I have to honor the truth of me and protect my wholeness. Protect as in take care of my wholeness and my wellness. So that I'm not violated by that anymore. It's big choices when we have to let go of our families of origin. We let go of the people that we love, but we can't no longer tolerate and accept that that's acceptable behavior. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing that with us. It's hard with blood relatives. Yes, the Serenity Prayer helps, and the spiritual path also. Yeah, it's the spiritual, the Serenity Prayer, I think, is it's a great principle. It's a great prayer, but it's also a great practice to say, okay, I'm having a hard time accepting what I cannot change. I have a hard time accepting my powerlessness. Don't want to go there. Don't want to know that. But that's the truth. And again, the distinction of spiritual well-being and health is the ability to say, oh, yep. And that's why the 12-step programs are so great, regardless of what your addiction is it allows you to look at and go, okay, I am powerless over the situation. I don't want to know that. I don't want to feel it. That we can go into denial. We can go into withdrawal, right? Or withdrawing from people by going, yep, no, I'm going to go use my drug of choice. Mine happen to be relationships. And so when we can begin to go, okay, I have to accept what I cannot change. That means I'm powerless over those people. I'm powerless over people, places, and things. Okay. That's a big be with, a big fat be with. And these kinds of realizations, in a sense, are an indication of a greater capacity for spiritual health and well-being. And I really highly encourage anybody and everybody to look at the 12 steps in terms of life patterns, life, being an emotional, an addict to emotions, or an addict to worry, an addict to guilt, an addict to substances. It's like they're all patterns and habits that are keeping us from acknowledging and being with the truth of who we are, and not only acknowledging but also the experience of being in that relationship with ourselves, as difficult as it is. I went through major withdrawal. I'm laughing because it wasn't once, it wasn't twice. Many, many times I went through withdrawal and it was the dark night of the soul kinds of experiences of horrendous darkness. And it was me with me. It was an honor, in a sense, It comes to be an honor to be present to yourself in this spiritual human journey. That's what I want for you, is to know that experience of it being an honor to walk with yourself honestly, authentically in that place of deep knowing who you are and what you've gone through to get here, wherever you are. And it's big work, but it's intense, and that's what we're here to do. Nobody wants to hear that, but we're here to learn and grow. We can only do that by saying, okay, what am I? I'm grumpy today. What's that about? Rather than going, I'm grumpy. I'm going to, I'm not going to feed the fish today because I'm grumpy or whatever. But it's like, nope, I'm grumpy. I still got to feed the fish. I still have my commitments. I still honor my everything. And what's the source of the grumpiness? And let's get clear. So the more that we can be flexible and open to what's that about? I want peace in my life, right? I just want things to be peaceful. So if it's not peaceful, then you got to ask yourself questions. Why am I putting up with this relationship or this job that isn't peaceful? Why am I putting up with this diet that I keep doing that's not peaceful? What is that about? Like I mentioned, I'm doing this 12-week workout thing, and it's 30 minutes. It's not going to kill me. And I'm doing it because I'm committed to being really strong for this backpacking trip that I'm doing, horse backpacking trip in a couple months. I'm committed to that. So I'm doing this. But if I wasn't committed to that, I wouldn't do this. I would do something else because in essence, it makes me grumpy. But I'm getting stronger, and that's the whole intention. So what's peaceful is I get to feel stronger and more prepared for that horse trip. If it wasn't that, then I wouldn't feel peaceful. I would go do something else. And that's what I'm asking you guys to do, is like, if it's not peaceful, start to ask yourself questions. Be open to saying, I want to know myself. I want to know what that is that allows me to be peaceful, and go with that. So what are your go-tos to support you in getting back to peace? That's the question. I've got 3 minutes to talk about that. But what are your go-tos? What do you use? And if you see this after this recording, down in the comments section, or you guys here, if you could chat and just add, what are your go-tos that brings you back to peace and equanimity? Another thing that when you're in health is you're in balance, right? There's the equanimity, which is a really beautiful word for balance. So what brings you back to balance with yourself? What brings you back to a sense of glad I'm me today? What brings you back to that? Why is this? I'm sorry, I just lost where I was going here. I guess I didn't answer the question. I thought I put some things down there for you. But what is it that that can help you do that? One of the things I want to mention is being outside, or being experiential. So sometimes people find meditation really helpful. Some people find activity, as in engaged yoga or walking, being connected to nature. When I sail, I love being in connection. When I'm on horseback ride, all of these outside activities, I'm so much more myself and come back to myself. So experience really giving yourself time and activities that engage you with nature and the people that you love. Those are some things that potentially can help you. David says, distance has been my saving through life, but awakening, I see the patterns and damage to my nephews' lives, but the manipulation is so strong, there's nothing I can do. Thank you. And it's that place again of accepting that you're doing the best you can, you're doing what you can do, and it may not be enough, and that's very, it's crushing. It's very sad that you can do what you can do, and it doesn't fix it. It doesn't heal it. It just does what it does. And this is a longer conversation in terms of, that spiritual principle that it's all good, and everything has its reasons and everything has its learning opportunities. But when you're dealing with what you're doing and the damage and the patterns that you're seeing and the way that you can't, it's just like it's crushing to our human experience. So I totally get that. And there's no spiritual principle that's going to take that one away, right, David? It's just like it doesn't take it away. It's because you're in this human experience. It's a big fat be with, and it's like, how do I be with that and honor the truth of it, without taking on blame or making it wrong and all of those kinds of things that are very challenging to our spiritual health and well-being. Marge says she rides bikes. I ride my bike, and it helps to slow down and breathe and remember that everyone has a different point of view. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. The one thing I will add is, and then I will go because it's overtime, is that we are all in the same boat. We are all in this human experience, having so many more experiences that are more like each other than not. The degree to which each of us are afraid, the degree to which each of us are lonely and disconnected, the degree to which we want engagement and connection, the degree to which we don't know how to even begin the relationship with ourselves. These are so normal. And when we can know that, then we can look at the person, whoever that is, and go, I know, it's hard for you too. It's hard. I know. And we can be more in that place of compassion for them and for ourselves. Hey, thanks you guys for being here today, truly. And thank you for staying in the chat and communicating with me. It just makes my day, truly. It's a blessing, and you are a blessing. Really, really, really. All right. I'll talk to you next week. And if anything else, leave a comment below, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye for now.